for her amazing work as a social worker, her presence on Black Twitter. She's an activist and a revolutionary. Please be sure that for this next hour, you have a comfy seat and you have some water and maybe a pen, because she's going to say some brilliant stuff that you're going to want to write down. And without any further ado, my favorite, Feminista Jones.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. How many of you have ever seen me speak before? A few people have, right? So you know that I'm quite interactive. I don't like preaching to people. I don't like lecturing. I don't get paid to lecture. I get paid to educate and to build and to hopefully get us to do things a lot differently than they have been done, right? Because we want to make the world a better place. That's why you're all social workers and educators and things like that, right? Okay. So I was asked to come here, and I'm so thankful. Thank you so much. I love the opportunity to come to these kinds of conferences and talk about things, particularly for folks that are considering careers in human sexuality and educators and the like. I wanted to open, and this is what I call my talk today. Are you ready to smash white things? Now, this is from a poem by David Nelson, as recited by Nina Simone, on one of her more angry moments, which we, of course, we have the right to be angry. Let me turn this off. Sorry. You know, I just moved into this whole Apple cycle and everything is integrated. So, you know, okay. So she was you know, talking and reciting this poem, and the idea was, are you ready to smash white things, and are you ready to build Black things? And I think for the context of this talk, white things, we are going to include these standards and these norms and these structures and these things that we believe or have been taught to believe are right and how they're supposed to be. And this idea that we need to smash these things if we are going to improve the lives of all people. So when I talk about smashing white things, it's not you white person that I'm about to hit with a hammer. I am thinking about everything that could be coded as whiteness and whites. Okay, so please think of it in that context. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am a social worker. I am coming up on 15 years of social work, and I know I don't look it, but you know, that's what you do, you know, and keeps you young. I started I've been in homelessness and housing for the most part, working with the mental health sector. I was homeless as a kid for a little bit, and I kind of knew that I wanted to do my part to help get people off of the streets and into housing. And so fresh out of undergrad, that's what I started doing. And then what we started learning, obviously, if anybody has done any work with people that are homeless, is that mental health disorders and psychiatric disabilities and things like that are quite prevalent among the homeless. And so I started switching gears a bit and started focusing more on that, particularly because most of the people I was working with were people of color. And I felt that there was a neglect there. There was a misunderstanding there. There was something that was lacking there. My peers did not look like me, but they were serving people that looked like me. So I wanted to see what was going on and kind of do my part. And if you follow me on Twitter, I often try to encourage young students to get into this work, particularly as people of color, because we need more folks to see themselves as helpers, right? Okay. I also do sex work, right? It took me a while to call it sex work, because when we think of sex work, we have these connotations. But I think anybody who is invested in sexual liberation and sex positivity does some level of sex work. And so my writing and my podcasting and my speaking and all of that really based on this idea that as a woman, I identify as a woman, as a Black person, I identify as a Black person, this idea of sexual liberation is so key and essential to overall liberation, considering the ways in which bodies that look like mine have been exploited for centuries. So in that ownership of that body and that ownership of that sexuality and that engagement in sexuality, I am basically saying, this is my path to freedom. And so I took that approach because I found growing up that Black folks ain't want to talk about sex. We had sex, we ain't want to talk about it. We had it in a lot of really wrong ways. We ain't want to talk about those wrong ways. We can't identify parts. We can't talk about diseases. We can't name positions, but we did them. And we got them, and we had kids, and we didn't know what was going on. Because the church said, no, no, no. But in the fellowship hall, we was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. So I really learned early on that My growing up in the church made me horny. Okay. In a more somber note, the other part of it was, you know, and I talk about kind of heavy topics. So if anything that I say does bother you, I will not be offended if you have to step out for a moment, because I do talk about issues related to trauma and things like that. For me, I had experienced sexual trauma from a very early age. And I think that what ended up happening for me along the way was that I found that the embrace of sexual empowerment was my therapy. It was my healing. It was my way of recovering. And I'm still recovering, and I'm still working through this. If you followed my Twitter stream this morning, you saw that I'm still talking about being in trauma recovery as it relates to sex and my sexual identity. But I found that kind of being vocal and being an advocate and being an educator and trying to kind of eradicate the ignorance and the things that lead to people committing these traumas could help more people that were victims like me. So that's kind of how I got into this whole thing, and why I had a column at Ebony that had over 60 articles that talked about sex in ways that people would email me every single time an article came out and say, "You're going to hell." Well, if they've got dildos in hell, I won't go. And I'll be fine. Let me get a first class ticket and we'll be all right. But you read something and you learned something. And so I thought that that was important. But if we go back to social work a little bit, right? One of the things I noticed as being somebody who writes about sex and talks about sex, but also engages in mental health social work, is that our field has a history of approaching the people that we serve as though they're asexual and aromantic and have nothing going for them, right? Have you noticed that? Is that something? Okay, so I did a training and I asked the service coordinators and the people that were working, I said, when you're doing your service planning, how many of you actually talk about sex and relationships as part of service plannings? And maybe 30% of the people there said that they do. And I'm like, so what exactly are you talking about? If you're talking about recovery and establishing relationships, why are you skipping intimate relationships? Why are you not talking about partnerships like this? And so I had to do some digging. I like your collar, by the way. That caught my attention. I'm sorry, Sue. I just saw it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. No, come stand with me and let's do this because I'm sorry. We're going to talk about that though. We're going to get there. We're going to get there. So I started digging a bit and started realizing that a lot of it came from this idea that we didn't want people with mental health issues or psychiatric disabilities to reproduce. So we didn't even consider that they had these sexual desires or wants or needs or the ways in which intimate relationships could help with recovery, right? Well, first of all, a lot of us don't believe that people can recover from psychiatric disabilities and disorders, so we have to start there, right? And so if we don't believe that, then we're not working towards all of the things that can holistically help people move towards recovery. So I found that we took this approach really because we were scared of what would happen if somebody who has schizophrenia had sex with somebody who has schizophrenia and they had a baby. We were scared of that. And our field became kind of worried about our being complicit in promoting that, as though it would somehow destroy the world. It won't. It will not. And we know that the people that we work with and the people that we teach and the people that we serve are engaging in these behaviors and these relationships, and they have every right to. There's no reason for us to pick it apart. So I combine those things, and that's what I do every day, pretty much. I kind of go back and forth between how can we think about conceived liberation, we're gonna talk about that in a minute, and then how are we working towards it, and then what are we checking about ourselves when we are approaching somebody and having these conversations. If we're making an assumption about the person in front of us based on what we see or what we think we know, are we fully providing them with the help and the services and the education that that person deserves or what we think they deserve? So that's something to think about as you're getting into this work. Okay. Blackness and sexuality, I mean, this is like one-on-one stuff. Blackness and sexuality, we know that there's these tropes. There's either this asexual trope or there's this hypersexual trope. I have an issue with the idea of hypersexuality because there is no baseline sexuality. So anytime we talk about hypersexuality, it's like, what are you comparing it to? We all know this, right? This is not, I'm just reviewing. This is like your first day of classes here, you know this. But I'm gonna say it again. So you know, I'm gonna say it again. There is, to me, this, I challenge and I always push back on these conversations of hypersexuality. There is no baseline, and if there is a baseline, it's probably something white. Like, remember what I said about white, the standard, right? So what is this white standard of sexuality, and we need to smash that, right? So if you have sex twice a week and I have sex 10 times a week, then I'm hypersexual compared to you, right? Right. Let's think about these things a little bit. I know it's a little bit, people are gonna say it's a little more clinical than that, but I think it's rather basic. And I think we have to kind of maybe simplify some of these conversations that we have and fuck more. Okay. So Black people, and a lot of you are starting to use this trendy idea of Black bodies, and you're not using them correctly because you're not considering that the context is within discussing the dehumanization of Black bodies. I still want you to use Black people, especially if you're not Black. So we're talking about Black people and sexuality and the ways in which Black bodies physically were manipulated, bought, sold, abused, used for breeding, used for the production of labor to establish America's bottom line is what it is, and we're still struggling to recover from that because America doesn't know how to function as a capitalist nation with labor costs, right? We're still, in 2015, trying to recover from the fact that this country was built on having no labor costs in their bottom line, okay? So that's why you don't want to give you more than $7.25. Because of our Black selves, remember that. This idea that Black people are being allowed to enjoy themselves, enjoy their bodies, enjoy anything, own anything that belonged to them, that didn't exist. That didn't exist. And we've had to disrupt that. And so a Black person saying, I love sex, is totally a disruption of everything we're supposed to be. And so when you're approaching somebody and you're working with a Black person, for example, who is dealing with whatever sexual issues, you have to remember that that person is still navigating a history and historical precedent that they're not allowed to, okay? Think about that. Similarly for women, if you're working with somebody who identifies as a woman, we understand that society does not allow for women to enjoy sex. That's it. And you have to understand that, and understand that when you're working with somebody and you think that they're struggling and you may see this as, you know, psychosis or whatever it is, it could just be this societal notion that it's not okay for the person to even talk to you about what they're dealing with sexually. So here you have this Black ass woman in front of you who's got to deal with all of those things, right? And still do it every day. And even to this day, people are constantly pushing back on me and challenging me and wanting me to shut up because it disrupts everything that they think they know about who has the rights to sexuality and sex and sexual agency. And I'm saying I do, and they're saying you do not, like twice as much. So think about that. What does it mean to be like kink affirming and trans inclusive and things like that? That really, wow, why is this important? God, if I go to another therapist who tells me that I have problems because I'm a masochist, we gonna fight. Baby, I got 2 graduate degrees. You don't need to tell me that. I know what I'm talking about and I know what the hell I like, but I don't need you to tell me that there's something fundamentally wrong because I say these things. And so we need more kink affirming and more kink aware and more trans inclusive people. Stop telling people that they are confused and whatever. Like, let people just be who they are. And I think that I'm noticing more trends towards being kink affirming, which is great. I do have a novel that is a BDSM story. I am very much a kink positive, sex positive person. I talk about these things. I talk about particularly Black people and people of color's engagement in the kink community, which is normally seen as a mostly white community and a white thing. And then some of us look at white people and say, yeah, y'all the crazy ones. We use that language, right? We say, y'all the crazy ones sticking needles in yourselves. But we do it too. So I kind of, I do a lot of talking about that. And I think that it's important that all of us remain kink aware and kink conscious. So, okay, intersectionality, right? That's a buzzword, isn't it? That's a word that you all just learned in the last 2 years, right? Been out for 3 decades. What does it mean? Anybody, what does it mean? What does intersectionality mean?
The way all of your different identities work together to form who you are.
Yes. Wow, that was great. Don't usually get such a succinct answer. Who came up with it? There we go. Okay. Know these things, please. Please know these things.
C.
Yes.
It's
Named
named
after
after
Kimberly. I saw that. I was like, she's from here. We did a show together. I really respect it. So what does it mean to be truly intersectional in your practice? And how do we make sure that we leave room for people to keep figuring out their different identities? How do we approach people as fluid and as just a one step on life and not trying to figure them out? What is one thing that we do as practitioners that forces us to try to figure people out? Can anybody think of something that we... Diagnosis. What else? Even before we get to the diagnosis. Psychosocials, assessments, these like quick, like boom, boom, boom. You got to figure somebody out and put it on a page so that you can find a way to get them some help, right? How long does it take to get to know somebody?
3 years.
3 years, somebody said? Shit, I'm still trying to figure out my dad, and I'm reaching towards 40. How long does it take to get to know someone to the point where you can actually be helpful to them? And I think that we use these frameworks, we use these tools, we use these things that we learn in institutions like this that teach us and guide us and we feel comfortable with them. And often we don't stop to think, is this okay? I have an issue with performing assessments of people in which I've got to write down on a paper all of these different things about their past so I can pass it on to a psychiatrist who can figure them out. I don't know this person, and I'm, as somebody who works in housing and homelessness, we do this a lot. It's a lot of trying to transfer people through the shelter system and get them connected with housing specialists and get them into supported housing or permanent housing or whatever it is. There's a lot of this, let's make these assessments, let's figure out where people belong. That's a lot of what we do, is figuring out where people belong for them. Because we're the helpers who are supposed to be helping them figure out where they're supposed to be. How many of you are fully comfortable with that? That's something to think about. I'm not saying you have to have the answers today. I'm just trying to get you to start thinking about what you're learning and what your practice is going to be. If you are tasked with this responsibility of assessing someone and figuring out that person's whole life so you can neatly package it in ways that a doctor or that other practitioners can understand, all for the purposes of providing help to this person, you've got to think about the ways in which your own biases seep in, your own prejudices, your own worldviews, your own paradigms, how all of that starts to shape the ways in which this person will receive help. Okay, think of that as practitioners. And then what do you do when you are not anything like the person? How do you connect to them on that level, right? We know, like, when we think about social work historically, particularly in America, what do we think of? White women. White women who didn't have shit else to do but go out and be charitable because that's what was ladylike to do. Your husband made all the money and it was up to you to do social good. Be charitable. Go out there and be nice and help the misfortunate. So much help. Okay. But when we see frontline workers, we often see a lot of the direct service and frontline workers who may not have the credentials or the degrees, but the ones that are doing the grunt work for less money tend to look more like the people that they're working with, right? While receiving supervision from people who have never walked a day in their life. Okay. So I work for an agency and we have this approach, we call it we look at it, the travel guide versus the travel agent. What does a travel agent do? A travel agent, you tell a travel agent where you want to go, they set everything up for you, they book your flight, they get your hotel, they set up your trip for you, and you basically just show up and you go and you navigate through everything that they've set up for you. A travel guide is somebody who meets you exactly where you want to be, and they walk along with you and point out certain things as you kind of figure out where you want to go. Oh, I think I want to stay at this hotel. Okay, cool. Let me tell you the good things about this hotel. Oh, I think I want to go to this attraction. Cool, I'll go with you and I'll show you the good things about it. There's a difference there. And I think that we often, within these clinical fields, tend to take the travel agent approach when we should be taking the travel guide approach. Again, because we think we know everything and we think we know the best ways to help people. And I think that that can be quite detrimental for people who are, again, as I said earlier, still trying to figure themselves out. They're still trying to figure out what it is they want in this world and where they are going in this world. And here we come, do-gooders that we are, thinking that we've assessed this person and their needs and we know everything that they want. And we're telling them, this is what you should do. And I know, because I got a degree. I'm still paying student loans. Listen, and that becomes problematic. Allies. Whew. How many of you are allies here? How many of you identify as allies here? Look at all these hands. Like, you guys know it's coming. She's gonna say some shit right now. Damn. She gonna make me feel like, damn it, man. All right, what does Freire say about this, right? Freire, we got again, one-on-one stuff, first day stuff. Freire talks about allies a bit. He's a bit critical of us. And I'm thinking of race, I'm thinking of gender, I'm thinking of sexuality, I'm thinking of all the ways in which we identify ourselves as allies with marginalized people. So it talks about generosity, false generosity. Stop me if you heard this. That is why the dispensers of false generosity become desperate at the slightest threat to its source. True generosity consists precisely in fighting to destroy the causes which nourish false charity. False charity constrains the fearful and subdued, the rejects of life, to extend their trembling hands. True generosity lies in striving so that these hands, whether of individuals or entire peoples, need to be extended less and less in supplication, so that more and more they become human hands which work, and working transform the world. What is he saying there? Why are you doing this? Somebody tell me why you got into this work.
To help somebody feel more positive in ways that I felt negative myself, to kind of not only find myself, but to help somebody else find themselves as well.
Everybody heard her? She said that she wanted to help other people feel positive in ways that she felt negative, so that she can help, other people not have to go through, pretty much not have to go through. Yeah. Anybody else? Why are you doing this? Yes.
Because nobody that looks or identifies like me is doing this work.
Okay. Anybody else? This side is kind of quiet.
Because I want to be a tool for others to use.
You want to be a tool for others to use.
I was told for so long that I couldn't be who I was, that I want to help other people identify right who they are.
In order to have the continued opportunity to express their generosity, the oppressors must perpetuate injustice as well. Again, in order to have the continued opportunity to express their generosity, oppressors must perpetuate injustice as well. That's what Freire says. You can't do this if we heal the world. You don't get a chance to do good if we actually heal the world, if we actually fix things. You don't get the opportunity to be the good ally, to be nice, to be generous, if we no longer have to work on that. So how much of our focus is on being the good ones who extend these trembling hands to help versus being the ones to totally destroy the need to help? Where's our work focused? And sometimes it feels that because there's so many ills in the world, we are constantly trying to drain an ocean with a teaspoon, as they say. We feel so overwhelmed. There's just so much to work against. Let's focus on helping the people and meeting them where they are and practicing harm reduction and things like that. But how many of us are wholeheartedly devoted to destroying those things that create the need for that help?
Yeah.
And how much do we get out of it when we go home at night and we think, I did a good job today. I helped this person. How does that make us feel? What do we get out of it? Instead of, I had to help somebody today, because fuck this shit. I'm kind of there. I had to do this today because it still exists. And I'm not so sure I feel that damn good about it anymore. Just think about that. Just let that settle a little bit. When you're offering help, I have this little talk, I'm gonna get on my little paper because I tweeted about this. I be writing speeches in my tweets. Okay. My little allies rant. I still love y'all though. Please receive this with love. Receive this with the love of an oppressed person who's tired of ally bullshit. Love. Allies, by definition, have a mutual interest and provide equitable benefits to each other. That's the definition of an ally. Black people don't owe a single thing to white supremacy. Non-heterosexual people don't owe a goddamn thing to sexism and supremacy. Transgender people don't owe a goddamn thing to cisgender people and their supremacy. We're not equal. We're not equitable. We do not have the same goal. The way many of you use ally suggests an outsider support, which is not anything close to a mutual benefit. Being outside supporters allows you the ease to divest from the cause when it becomes inconvenient for you. And my black skin goes nowhere. So-called allies cannot help but rely on the privileges that make them outsiders in these causes. You can't. You wake up every single morning privileged. You don't want to be, you recognize it, you check it, okay, great, but you can't divest of it. So just accept that for what it is. The world is not set up to allow you to divest of your privilege. So you'll always have this unfair advantage, okay? And having such privileges, whether you want them or not, does not allow you the opportunity to truly form a mutually beneficial allegiance with us. It's impossible. Your focus should be on being good people for the sake of being good people and learning what that actually means. For many allies, their self-interest will always trump the liberation of the oppressed. Particularly with Black liberation, it's only worth supporting so long as it doesn't hurt you as allies. And the minute Black liberation appears to get in the way of what allies want for themselves, they will show their true selves. These true selves are privileged, they're often bigoted, and they won't ever invite my Black ass over for dinner. When's the last time you had a Black person over for dinner? Don't answer that. When's the last time you went out of your way to invite someone that you want to serve and help and educate to actually be a part of your life outside of doing this work? What do white people, or this whiteness, what does it have to gain by fully investing in this idea of Black liberation, which is equated with our freedom? The liberation of Black people has no comparable benefit for anyone else worth walking this earth. How many of you have gone around shouting Black Lives Matter? We know this is a movement, right? How many of you are comfortable with saying Black Lives Matter? Or do you secretly want to say all lives matter, God damn it? You do, you want to say it. You want to say it. I know it. But you have to understand and kind of consider why you may be uncomfortable with saying Black Lives Matter, and why you exist in a society that wants you to be uncomfortable with saying Black Lives Matter, because they do not want you to believe that Black Lives Matter, even when you go into these agencies, into these classrooms, and you are teaching Black children, and you are working with homeless Black people, and you are dealing with Black people that have sexual issues. They do not want you to believe that any of these people actually truly matter. So it becomes very uncomfortable for you to assert that Black Lives Matter without a caveat, but everybody else matters too. There's no room for that. If allyship as defined represents two groups working together towards mutually beneficial goals, what do white people get out of Black liberation? Now, as I was writing this, a white man jumps in and says, yes, you're wrong. Of course, I'm wrong to you, Mr. White Man. If Black people are liberated, the whole world is better, and therefore I benefit from it. And I said to him, you will benefit from everything this world has to offer, whether or not Black people are liberated. So please shut up and stop interrupting me and let me finish what I have to say. I am willing to die for the freedom of Black people. Are you, as an ally, willing to die for Black liberation? If that were what it takes. I continue to argue that we need to scrap the idea of allies and focus on what it means to be a good person who believes in marginalized humanity. And when I say marginalized humanity, I mean that all these people that we have marginalized, all these people that we have othered, you believe that they are human beings too. You have to believe that, right? Because if you believe in that humanity, then you will work as hard as you can in your own life every single day until all of us are free. And that's what being a good person is. It's not about an ally label. It's about being a good person. You will not have to rely on one of us to tell you what to do. You will not have to rely on us to hold your hands. You will find the way because you're committed to it. How many of you actually seek out marginalized professors? When you go to take a class, if it's a class that's taught by a number of different people, how many of you actually take an affirmative action to take a class by, when there's an option, by a person of color, a person who may openly identify as being LGBTQ, a woman, a person who may identify as being disabled? Like, you're actively, you're not just signing up because it's so-and-so, whatever. You're actually looking for someone different. Or advocating for other options, as you said, like you said, when there's options. But how many of you are challenging your administration to make sure that you have other options? Because who better to learn about liberation work from than the people who have been working their entire lives to be liberated? And that's across every identity, right? I'm gonna skip over that part because y'all already pissed off. We're good. I don't have a lot of time to talk about this all day. So you mentioned help, and I asked you that for a reason, this idea of help. We have a tendency in our careers to center ourselves in help, and this idea of help. We tend to ask the question, how can I help you? What might be the problem with that question, saying, how can I help you? Right? First assumption you made, that they need help. What is it about our bias and our approach to people that we automatically assume we know they need help? We go out into this world and we think that person needs help. You walk past a homeless person on the street, your mind triggers, that person needs help. Let me offer them a few dollars. You take out a few dollars, you toss it at them, you feel like you did something good. But you don't know if that person has a history of having money thrown at them in a traumatically sexual way. They didn't ask you to throw that money at them. You don't know if they needed that money, if they wanted that money, because every time they get money, they run to the liquor store, they would have preferred some food as a form of harm reduction, but you didn't ask. You made the assumption about the kind of help that they would need. So when you're centering yourself and you say, how can I help you? You're not even taking into consideration this person as the center focus. I like to say, the question is, do you need help? And if a person says yes, then it's, what kind of help do you need? Because that's recognizing that you may not be the one that can help them, okay? And you allow them to kind of define what kind of help they can need. Again, with this service planning and things like that we do, we often think that we know the answers to what this person would just do this, and this, they can get it all together. But maybe they don't want to do that. Maybe they want to focus on something else. So you're asking, what kind of help do you need? And you have to be able to recognize that maybe you can't fix it. Maybe you're not going to be the right one. And you got to step back and say, this isn't for me. And if you can, then you have to say, well, listen, Here's what I can offer. And if you're open to it, I'm willing to work with you. I think that that's important. And I think when you're thinking of allies and allyship, which I want you to stop using that word, you have to think of that relationship. It's very much, allies very much approach a lot of these liberation movements as, well, how can I help you? When often it's about, pay attention to what we're saying and get in where you fit in, right? What is this problem people have? I'll go back to Black Lives Matter. Many people struggle with not being invited to help. Many people struggle with this idea that a group of other people may just want to do something for themselves. What does liberation mean? I don't think we know this, and I've been saying this a lot recently, and I've really been thinking about this. I don't think that any of us in this room can conceive what freedom and liberation means. You can ask somebody, what do you think their freedom means? They start listing all these things like this. Have you ever had it? If you haven't had it, how do you know what it is, what it looks like, what it is, what it feels like? We tend to place liberation and freedom as the opposite of oppression, but we can't do that, because we're still creating this framework and this paradigm in which liberation is still connected to oppression. It's still connected there. And maybe after centuries of oppression, we have to start thinking about this a little bit differently. Maybe we don't want our liberation and freedom connected to that. But we can't conceive anything of it, because when have we ever experienced true freedom? What model do we have? What can we look to? Not a single person in this room can really say that they know what it's like to live in a free society. Yet we keep fighting and we're working hard towards this liberation and freedom, and we're marching and we're struggling and we're raising our fists and we're making demands and we're shutting down universities in South Africa and getting them to not raise the fees. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's a huge problem. Really quickly, in South Africa and other countries across over 18 universities, for the last 2 weeks, students have waged uprisings against their universities for raising the fees to the point where they could not re-enroll into college. The fees were raised to the point where 95% of South African students could not re-enroll in college. You don't know anything about that. Many of you don't. They won today. The president came out and said, we will not increase the fees, because they took to the streets. They shut down the universities, they disrupted the classes, and they forced them to act. And when we say Black Lives Matter, it's not just Black American lives, lives across the diaspora. And the fact that many of you don't know that literally tens of thousands of Black people have been uprising for the last 2 weeks in another part of this world says something, doesn't it? There's no obligation for any of the oppressed people to work towards liberating the oppressors. Freire tells us, again, this is first day stuff. We have no obligation to educate you. We have no obligation to work towards your own liberation. You have to liberate yourselves. But again, you don't know where you're going to. You don't have an idea. You don't know what that looks like. So I'm leaving that as a question, basically. How do we do this? How do we conceive of freedom and liberation and work towards that in ourselves, liberating ourselves of our own biases, our own prejudices? We'll never divest of our privilege, so how do we take our privileges and use it to work towards what we're doing, right? Because we're never not going to be these privileged people. I am an able-bodied, cisgendered woman. I cannot divest of that. But that doesn't mean that I can't work with others. It doesn't mean that I can't step aside and actually let somebody else get on the microphone, right? It doesn't mean that, when I'm invited to a panel to talk about trans women, I'm like, why are you asking me? I don't identify as a trans woman. I got a whole list of trans women that do this, that you could go to, who are looking to be paid and compensated for the work that they're doing. Why are you coming to me? Why are we having panels about womanhood and women that are mostly men? Why are we talking about reproductive health issues for people who identify as women, and the panels are not people who identify as women? Why is it still happening in 2015? And why are the people invited to those things not saying, hold up, no, you're not gonna do this. To my left, to my right. You know, women here. Let me give this money back. You know why that's not happening, right? So how does social work become activism, right? How do we decide that we're going to wake up and we are going to disrupt these norms and we're going to smash white things? We have to be committed to that. We have to not be afraid of that. We have to not be afraid of the things that will make us uncomfortable when we step off of these pedestals that we were born onto. We have to be okay with being uncomfortable. We have to be comfortable in the muck. We have to be comfortable in the trenches. We have to be comfortable as teachers. Many of you are teachers, particularly if you're a white teacher that is standing in front of a classroom of mostly non-white children. You have to understand the impact of your whiteness on them every day as they walk in. They see you as oppressors. And if you've paid attention to Common Core, it is oppressive. So I have a kid I'm trying to teach, and he's 9, and I don't get it. Common Core, what's that? That's my little dig. I gotta put a Common Core dig in everything I do now. In New York City, Black girls are 10 times more likely to be suspended than white girls. Black girls are suspended from school more than any group of boys. Most of the teachers in New York City are white women. What does that say? So historically, white women, I love you all hate me right now, I love it. Y'all been jealous of Black women for as long as we have been forced to be here. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, because you're educators and you have to understand this dynamic. You have to. You walk out of this room, I hope you understand this dynamic. Black women had no choice with what white men did to them as owners and masters. We did not invite it. We did not entice it. We did not lure your ancestors' husbands away. We did not tell them to come to the quarters after and have fun with us. They did that because they needed more labor. They did that because they needed more bodies to perform labor. And yet, the mistresses still managed to be jealous. The dynamic of jealousy between white women and Black women as a result of this, particularly here in America, is one we don't talk about. Except when you're writing a think piece about how Beyonce isn't a real feminist. Except when you're writing about what it means to be, a real feminist and how feminism is changing now. It's all these Black bitches talking about being feminist. There's jealousy there. There's a we own this womanhood. We are women. We are the standards of womanhood. Our straight hair, our white skin, our cisgendered formations. This is what womanhood is. And how dare any of these other ones try to act like they get a part of this? That's a jealousy that has lingered and perpetuated and has caused little Black girls to have their lives nearly ruined by white teachers, white female teachers, white women teachers. And then you go to college and you gotta deal with it again. You go to your human sexuality classes that are taught mostly by white women who don't believe that you have the right, fundamentally, to enjoy the same privileges of sexuality as they do. So those of you that are about to become those professors, what are you gonna do to disrupt that and to own that struggle? Because Black girls are the fastest growing population in prisons right now, and we know that the school to prison pipeline is a very real thing, so who is sending our girls to jail? Please think about these things. These are things I want y'all to start thinking about as you're about to go out and be these degreed people who are going to be educating these next generations and working and providing services for these next generations. You have to see it from our side. You have to see it from where we're coming from. You won't ever be able to, but at least try. You have to see what it's like to grow up as a marginalized or othered or oppressed person and be told that in order for me, to liberate and elevate out of this, I have to rely on the instruction of and guidance of people who have perpetually oppressed me. That my education and my experience isn't as good if it comes from my own people, like say at Howard. But if I go to Penn, then it meant something. Damn, I did go to Penn. It does mean something. Because they look at the resume and they see it. And it does mean something. For them, it's more valuable. But I can recognize that privilege and see it for what it is. You have to understand that when you step in front of a classroom, or when you're sitting in a closed space and you're about to listen to someone talk about what's going on with them, and you're going to try to figure them out in that time to be able to offer them help, you have to understand just what your presence alone, how that's having an impact on them. And it's okay. It's okay to not feel good about that. You didn't set this up. You may perpetuate it, but you didn't set this up. And I'm calling on you to challenge yourself in that way. Okay, so I'm gonna end this now because y'all looking like, whoo, get this girl out of here. So this is what, I'm going to my takeaways. This is what I want you to take away. First, this idea of allowing people to do for themselves and offer assistance as requested and as they state they need, not as imposed. We can't be impositions. And I find that often, and I've been in imposition in someone's life as a social worker. I know that. I've recognized it, and I try to do better. But we have to understand that we are not here to impose on people's will and their self-determination. We're here to help as needed. Recognize that people who do say that they need help can simultaneously have the will and ability to liberate themselves and fight for themselves. So when have we ever had the opportunity to fully fight for ourselves as marginalized people without, funding from others, marching with others, allies being there? And it's not that we don't appreciate the support and the help, because we absolutely do need it, when it's not oppressive and when it's beneficial. But when have we ever had the opportunity to show that we are quite capable of freeing ourselves? We haven't. And I think that's because when you are a privileged person or an oppressed person, you may have a very not so subtle fear of what happens when that group does for themselves and frees themselves, and how it challenges your hold on things. So walk away from that. Become comfortable with the fact that you may not have everything all the time for the rest of your life. We have to recognize that we all have biases, and it's not as simple as checking privilege, but it's about examining how our privileges affect our approach to the work and how people receive our efforts towards making the world a better place. And again, it's about looking at yourself in this space and how it may be affecting somebody's willingness to accept what it is that you're offering. And not take it as personal rejection when someone says, no, I don't want you, I want her. I don't want you, I want him. Don't be offended, it's okay. It's okay. You don't get paid enough to be that man. Resist relying on the status quo and seek to be innovative. It's kind of what I was talking about, this idea of assessments. I don't even do them anymore. I don't do it. I can't write a psychosocial. It's against everything that I believe in. Revolutionary work shatters oppressive frameworks, even when it puts the practitioner at risk, both in reputation and risk to self. How far are you willing to go? And when given opportunities to change narratives, challenge those who write bigotry into annals and legislation. If you got invited to the conversation, be the person that raises their hand and says, it's not gonna work. Look around and see that there's not that representation that should be there, and you say, okay, I'm gonna be here in this moment. No, that's not gonna work. Challenge people to do better. and deny the temptation to be self-serving and gain kudos as a good ally, and focus more on engaging in work that revolutionizes access to the resources and tools that can aid self-liberation. Like sitting here. Okay. More people need to have access to this space. So what can we do to make sure that that happens? Right? That makes sense. Okay, I'm done. All right.
I don't know about you all, I need to take a breath. Feel free to do that if you need that. Thank you so much, Feminista Jones. We have about 10 minutes. So while we're mulling over all of this, all these pearls, if there are questions, we can take some, right? We have just under 10 minutes. So raise your hand. If you want to ask Feminista anything. I don't think she bites.
I do.
Unless you ask her. Not without consent.
Yeah.
Actually, I just talk to you one-on-one.
I like my book. I mean, you know, I wrote a book that I thought was going to sell 250 copies. That was my goal, because I was like, whatever, it's what? And so we're approaching 8,000 copies in a year. And it was option for a TV show. So you may see it on the TV screen, hopefully soon, the next couple of years or so. It's about a Black couple that lives the BDSM lifestyle. They have a DS dynamic, and I wanted to write to kind of show that Black people do this too, and that we go to work and we shower and we have Thanksgiving dinner, and we're not always in leather and lace. I mean, some are, but not all of us. And I mean, it's just kind of this idea that we do this too, Punchinella, and I think it's written better than 50 Shades of Grey, because that wasn't about BDSM. That was about an abusive man who likes weird sex, right? So if you want to buy it, that's cool. I have a conference that I put together for it's happening this Sunday. It's called the Women's Freedom Conference, and it is the first all-digital conference organized totally by women of color, featuring totally women of color. We have about 30 presentations. It is streamed online. It is free, and you'll be able to access it. Go to womensfreedomconference.com starting 9 a.m. on Sunday. You'll be able to log on from your phone, your computer, doesn't matter. And you'll hear people like Jamel Hill from ESPN, Basi Ikpi, the poet, Carol Matarasi-Tarani from Huffington Post. You'll hear me. You'll hear L-Joy Williams, who's always on MSNBC looking fabulous. You'll hear women that have never presented before. We have women from 5 continents. We have trans women, cis women, queer women, atheist women, Christian women, all kind of things. Just look at the schedule, it's pretty awesome. Womensfreedomconference.com. Womensfreedomconference.com. You look at the schedule, it's pretty awesome, if I say so myself. Majora Carter's doing a webinar, Dior Vargas is doing a webinar. You gotta pay for those though, because we pay women to teach. Yes, question.
So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.
You're amazing.
Thank you, sorry.
And I do have a question for you. I find that white supremacy doesn't just affect white people. It also affects people of color. And I often feel like I'm losing a battle against white supremacy when I hear out of the mouths of people of color, all I can ever be is a drug dealer or a basketball player or here just because I am a person of color and, you know, biology says that I am inferior. And so I'm just wondering what you have to offer when you hear white supremacy come out of the mouths of people of color and how you attack that.
I attack it with empathy because they're right, for the most part. This world is not set up for them to be more than that. And those of us that get through are quite lucky. And we have to remember that we are quite lucky. they don't really have a real reason to believe otherwise. And that's why it becomes our work to show them that they have other options. Again, when you are a social worker, that's pretty much what you're doing. You're showing people the options that they have, and you're trying to let them know that they have viable options. I approach with empathy, and I understand where they're coming from. And you tell people something enough times, they believe it. And we've had centuries of this messaging that we are not going to be anything more than white people will allow us to be. And if we get that close, we'll stop being black, right? Oprah, Michael Jordan, they're not really black to them anymore. They've become raceless. So their black ass can't get a bag at Hermes. Next.
Right.
Yes.
You made a little list of people that you had presenting at this conference.
Yes.
Do you have any women, men, whatever, people with disabilities?
Yes.
Presenting at your conference?
So, no, that's fine. On my advisory board, I do have a woman who is an advocate for the deaf community. And so we've been working so hard to make sure that everything is accessible. We have people who have different levels of disability that they have not always disclosed, but we do have people that have mental health disabilities. We do have at least 2 people that have physical disabilities. It may not be represented because they're not standing, but I know that they are. And we wanted to make sure that we could represent all kinds of people without making that the center part of, like one woman I know, one of the talks she's doing is not about being disabled, but I know she is disabled. So does that make sense? Like I didn't want to force her to feel like she had to talk about being disabled, but I know she is, that kind of thing. We reached out for that. We like really were like, we had over 65 submissions and I kind of combed through and I was like, that's what I chose to do. Yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah. Sure. Yes. Please. Hi. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm with this.
Thank you. My soul is so warm right now. And what I struggle with is I'm dismantling and I'm smashing the whiteness, and I also need to work. Right? So how do I navigate smashing? Like I'm in a situation right now where I need to smash the whiteness, and I think that would take me away from the space, from the school is what it is, and then the students will still be exposed to the white. Do you feel what I'm saying? So I'm like here for this talk right now. I'm here for it, and then I'm gonna walk out of this room and I'm gonna be like, well, there's bills to pay.
Yeah. I know for sure. Like, but again, so the point that I just made about we have to recognize that people can need help, like you need help to pay your bills, but still want to fight for your liberation, and you have to work within what you got, right? So that should make us more eager and fight harder to dismantle these things that put you in that position so that you can be free to do the things that you want to do and have to get the money in ways that you want to do. I chose this work because I love it. I like what I do. I hear so many people complain about the jobs that they have, and I feel for them. And I struggled for a long time financially because I wanted to do something that felt right to me. And sometimes it is about making sacrifices, and sometimes it's about looking at those bills and how many of them are necessary, and like how can I alleviate some of those things. But at the same time, it's like you have to work within it. And then when you're going to work and you're making that money, you smash the little things. You're sitting there at your desk, they put something on your desk you ain't want, you smash it, put it back. You know, you make your little inroads there. You're at a HR meeting of some sort, you're putting in some input, you have some oversight over who gets hired, little ways in which you can do that. I think that helps. It's hard. It's hard because you're just like, oh my God, I'm one of a few, and I'm trying to do so much. And that's the other part of liberation work. And these freedom fighters, they are tasked with doing so much and it's so few. And we become so burdened and burned out. And then that's why we have these cycles, these liberation cycles. If you notice, about every 30 years, we have a new cycle of some kind of freedom fight that fizzles out because so many people had to take on so much, to smash so much, and they just got so tired. And then they have bills to pay. I have a child, right? So a lot of that stuff, I can't be out in the streets like that anymore. Last time I took my son to a rally, the police almost beat him up. I can't do it anymore. I can't. Like, they were hitting children. And I had brothers coming in and shielding my son from getting hit by police. I can't do that anymore. So we have to kind of make those little choices. Well, pay your bills, please. We need you to eat. We need you to have a place to live because that's the only way you can keep doing this right? Yes.
I will, of course, echo what everyone else said by thank you for all the words that you shared with us. All of that is. My question to you is about Black men and how you get those spaces. I always find myself as a Black man in my identity as the same as a Black man. And I'm one of the few people in the room that identify that way talking. I don't know what that obviously needs to be done. I don't know what type of conversations I need to be having with my people here. They're just not here.
Why would they feel comfortable being here? I mean, let's think about that. Is it that you have to do the outreach or that we have to make these spaces more welcoming and inviting to people like that? More accessible to people like that? More representative of people like that? I think that's a challenge that us as organizers and those of us who put together these kinds of things have to make sure that we are doing that and not leaving it on people like you to engage others, right? So I'm in social work, and finding a Black cisgender heterosexual man in social work who lasts more than 5 years is that possible? Does that exist? Like, we don't see that often. Yet, that's often who we're working with, right? So what is it about their notions of masculinity? Have to be providers? Are we paying people enough for them to feel like it's worth going into because they're charged with being providers? So are they going to take on these jobs? How are we getting them into the classrooms? You know, we have to kind of look at all of that, but I think it's really about making these spaces more welcoming and comfortable for folks to attend and having them feel like they're going to get something out of it. That's where I think we need to go. Yes.
I think it's the last question. I completely understand what you're saying about the assessment, diagnosis, how it's like perpetuates like a negative labeling. But I've had like a lot of doctors say to me like, well, I have to put this, so insurance will pay for it. So like it's like this whole big strangling system. So like if you don't do it that way, like what do you think? Like how do we just change that whole?
How do we come up with the DSM? Somebody said that we need this, and they put it into a plan. Thank you for that question. Great question. They put it into a plan and said, we're going to come up with this diagnostic manual that's going to become the language of what we do. And we're going to get everybody to learn it so that we can communicate with each other. And now we're in the 5th version that nobody likes. And we still got to use it, right? But what I'm saying, the point is that at some point, someone said, we have to change what we've been doing and come up with something new. So then it becomes like, who among you are going to say, well, hey, let me do this particular work or this research or write this paper or do this study or whatever that's going to show why maybe we don't need to be focusing so much on that. The insurance issue, that's above our pay grade. We're not quite there. Like that insurance issue is a really, really, really big thing. And that speaks to, again, American capitalism and rising healthcare costs and the lack of access for mental health care and all those kinds of support. I mean, there's so much in there, and we can't do so much about it unless we decide to become administrators and legislators and kind of take, you know, our clinical approaches and our educational approaches and then take that into that legislative sector. Then maybe we can work to build, you know, towards those things. We get our coalitions that are working towards that. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard. And like I said, I'm giving you stuff to think about. I'm not saying it's gonna happen overnight, but really start thinking of these kind of revolutionary, innovative ways and how you may want to change something. I mean, you're also young, so you have so much more time. Who's to say when you're 65, you aren't going to be the one who revolutionizes, but you started now. So. Okay. Yeah, let's stay for lunch. Oh, for sure. I don't miss a meal. Thank you.